I hope I've said your names correctly, but you can, introduce yourself again a little bit. So welcome here. Naomi, you're at the top of my screen. Please introduce yourself and tell us why this topic is so important and where you're from as well.
Hey, wonderful to be here. Look, I live in Australia. At the moment, I'm in Newcastle on an arts residency, but I normally reside in Broken Hill. I'm an artist, a yoga teacher, shamanic practitioner, transpersonal therapist. Human explorer is actually one of my favorite titles to use. This topic is such a deep, rich exploration. It's hard to encapsulate in a few words, but I guess really, the embodiment of the union with life and the union with the self as an expression of life is the core piece to everything that I do. And the power that's found and the healing that's found in the space of being able to come into a healthy relationship with ourselves and with other in that sexual space is it's enlivening, and I guess it really speaks to the core pillars of my work, which is about connection and intentionality and passion. So that's me. Thanks.
Beautiful. Thank you. Very powerful. Amazing. Alex, please feel free to introduce yourself. Tell us where you're from and why are you so passionate about this topic?
Beautiful. Thank you. I was born in Winnipeg, Manitoba in Canada, and I've lived all over the place, currently in Bali. And right now I help men quit porn and redirect that sexual energy in a more healthy and productive way. And so I quit porn at around 16 and a half years old, just kind of intuitively knew it was not conducive to me at all. And the interesting thing about sacred sexuality for me is I was raised with an absent father. And so I carried boy psychology for a very long time. And that went into my relationships specifically in an immature masculine way. And so right now I'm fascinated with sacred sexuality, combining that with the mature masculine, and of course, like coming together and creating magic and sacred union. And so it's a combination of, for me, it's a combination of the magic side of sacred sexuality, but also the mature masculine coming in, not in a way where the shadows and the dark side is suppressed and all of this. And so, yeah, my journey is quite interesting, but I'll leave it at that for now. But right now I'm helping men quit porn and redirect that energy in a healthy and productive way.
I love that, Alex. That is so important for our men, our boys. I've got two boys, teenage boys, and 17 and 14, and they're at that age, where they're trying to find their way. And the world offers so much, but it's when we come back inside and we can really grow within ourselves and, step into that mature masculinity throughout your life, that it really, really helps and transforms you as a human being in a completely different way. So it's really powerful work. So thank you for sharing. Nadine, tell us where you're from and why is this topic so important? And tell us a bit about yourself.
Hello, I'm so happy to be here. Thank you, Natalie. And for everyone, so lovely to meet you, Alex, and see you again, Naomi. I am Nadine Keller, and right now I live in Half Moon Bay, California. I'm a somatic therapist, an ordained priestess and minister, definitely a tantrika and a dakini. However, I don't identify in those realms anymore, but I did spend about 10 years working as a sexual healer. And now I mostly work with women and couples. Um, I've been fascinated with sexuality and particularly bringing the sacredness to it since I was a little girl. Even just walking around and seeing the birds and the bees, I knew there was something to the creation of life. And I grew up in an extremely religious family, which was very shaming of sexuality. So, of course, I saw all of the shadow that brought. And in my own journey, which I'm sure we'll talk about later, I just saw how it could be a force of healing, not only on the physical body, but also a gateway for how human evolution, I think it's one of the keys for us to transcend from some of the lower density animal parts of ourselves, which are important. But I believe divinizing our sexuality is literally that gateway that elevates our consciousness and our whole species. And so that's what I'm really, really passionate about at this time in my life.
That's beautiful, Nadine. Thank you. I love that. The gateway to human evolution. I love
Yeah.
those words because, you know, it's been made sleazy and shameful for such a long time that, but it's who we are. It's our natural state of being. It's the energy that flows through us. It's that expansiveness into higher consciousness, right? Into the state of beautiful beingness, which we have been shutting down. And also, it's been made something completely different. And so, a lot of people are not experiencing pleasure, not experiencing life in its fullest, and living from the shadow, living from that space where they are feeling shameful, you know, behind bedroom doors, on devices, like you said, Alex, you know, finding their pleasure in something that is so superficial, where we can within our own being and in our own body expand and find so much love. And but what it is, it's basically unconditional universal love. mm. Anyone want to speak into that? Whatever drops in for you.
Yeah, I'm happy to. Unconditional universal love. I think, like, similarly, I was raised in quite a religious home, and there was that flavor, there was that offering, but it was not embodied, and it was quite often this construct. It was a paradigm that we were kind of playing a role in, and but there was a felt sense in me, similarly as a child, particularly in nature, of this, I'm connected here, like I'm actually like there is this force of love. And I mean, as I speak about it, I've got like tingles through my whole body right now, because there's this all the cells in my body are just calling out for that and are that. And so it feels like my life has been this journey of kind of having that taste, in my mouth from an early age of what that love offered, and then kind of moving through a forgetting and a remembering process. And so it's just the depths, of what that brings to, if I remember, and there are moments, of course, in the humanness, that there's the rising and the falling of the waves of remembrance. If I am in that remembrance, then I'm actually going to bring much more of a fullness of self. I'm going to experience much more of what life is. It's that interdimensionality of it.
Yeah, beautiful. I love that. Deep embodied love. What does that mean? What does it mean to not have a quick fix? And this is the thing that a lot of people are kind of wanting. They want a quick fix, put a plaster over that wound and, receive this pleasure, receive this thing on the outside, and that's going to bandage things up for us and we can move ahead again. But how do we experience deep embodied love within ourselves?
Mm.
Alex, do you want to
Did
speak
I,
to
yeah,
this?
yeah, I'd like to speak on what's alive related to that question, but in regards to deep embodied love, in specific to connection, I believe that if a man watches porn, sacred sexuality is 99.999% of the time not possible. And for the reason of course, porn is so highly stimulating, it's fake, it's like, for example, you go and you eat a bunch of sugar, and then you go and eat like a carrot or like a watermelon. It's going to taste drastically different. Meanwhile, the watermelon is so orgasmic and so juicy and full of color and full of life. But if you go on something like porn, like it's not possible to experience that depth, because porn is for most men, it's outcome driven and it's very cocked ahead. And so by that, I mean, like, it's always judging the girl. which girl is the best, which part of the scene is the best. And if you judge people and you do cock to mind in porn, you're going to do it in real life, and you're going to treat women as objects. And so like sacredness is not possible when there's that frequency of porn, let alone when you're giving away your power and you're transmuting that energy to that area. And so deep embodied love to me is, number one, for men, reclaiming their power back and bringing that internal. And number two is men are very outcome driven, which is very beautiful and needed. And at the same time, it's about being present, especially in union, because if men are connecting their cock to their head during sacred connection, it's not going to work. The cock has to activate the heart. And that's when you can really get that energy that circulates between the man and the woman. And so deep embodied love to me is just that. But I don't think it's possible when a man watches porn, or anyone watches porn, but specifically I'm a man and I work with men. And so I'm going to speak in that regard.
Yeah, I totally agree. Anyone else want to speak into that, Nadine?
Yeah, I would love to. First of all, excuse my tears that are flowing. I'm so touched by your words, Alex. Yeah. I think maybe this speaks to the power of bringing sacredness to this topic. My son, I have two sons, 24 and 20, and my 20-year-old, his senior project for graduating high school, in America it's called high school, it was about porn and the detriments of porn. So it makes me so happy to see a young man like you, Alex, like going out in the world like this, because I feel that disconnect that pornography can bring in between sexuality and human beings is probably one of the biggest problems I see in my couples relationships. Whether the
Yeah.
woman or the man are watching it, or even as a couple, they're because what happens is in these long-term relationships, eventually we're going to long for something more, and that quick fix or that primitive drive or just the physicality of sexuality, it's very fleeting, and it's not what's going to bring us into that higher relationship, healing, connective realm. So
Yeah.
um, yeah, it just warms my heart so much to know there's men like you doing this.
Mm,
Yeah, so
beautiful,
thank you. It's
Nadine.
a big, just like addiction, our brain gets overstimulated and then it's hard to find that way back. But it is possible.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
Yeah.
and I feel this is the key here, the word addiction. It
Uh,
comes with fulfilling a need or closing up a wound, right? And then it becomes this patterning. If you do something over and over and over again, but it's not fulfilling, it's not giving you anything, it's only that little, like I said, plaster over the wound. What happens, and Alex so rightly said, it's a mind connection, or a mind you know vagina connection. And I'm going to say that word because it's important, right? And the yoni is sacred, and so rightfully so that we have this magic within us. And when we are in that stage of where we are doing something in a pattern, we're not accessing that magic, we're not accessing that beautiful flow of energy that is within us, right? Because and I find this, and I'll share something really quite personal. I find that in the relationships that I've been, those men that have watched porn, they were very disconnected from themselves as well. They didn't understand what it felt like to be loved and to be held by a woman and to give to a woman in a very sacred way. And it was all about the dress up, and it was all about the whips and I'm nothing wrong with that. If that's your thing, go for it, right? But it was all about the outer things rather than the inner things. When there is sacred sexuality, there is nothing needed but you and that person, hearts connected, right? In such a beautiful, magical way.
Mhm.
And so there is a real disconnect, and it's about how do we bring people back to that heart connection? What are the wounds that you've seen in your own work, or that you've overcome, that you've had to heal to come back to that space of heart connection?
Yeah,
Anybody?
I can speak on that briefly. So as a child, I craved my mother's love more, and she didn't always give it. My dad gave love very freely, but I always wanted my mother's love, and she never really gave it to me. And so that's what sparked my porn addiction for a few years. I think it was like 14 to 16 and a half. I was like really, really addicted, looking for that motherly love, you know, and I did it in private, and there was a lot of guilt and shame attached to it. And my mother never gave me the love that I desired. And so firstly, it's looking at, and I wasn't able to love myself at that point. I'm like, Mom, love me. And it wasn't there. And so it was quite challenging. And so naturally I went to porn, specifically point of view porn. Like it was real, you know, I was like really imagining like it was like a real experience. And like the woman like really loved me. And then one day I'm just like, this is not the real connection that I want. And you're totally right. When you're in sacred union with someone, like there's nothing else in the world that you want in that moment. Like when you're truly connected and fully present, there is nothing else. Like you're not thinking about, oh, like I'm gonna go eat food later. Like you're fully there in the present moment. And so that's really where I want to guide men back to is, okay, yes, quitting porn, it'll be challenging in the beginning. It'll be hard. It'll be like detoxing. But once you can get to that place where you can really enjoy that sacred connection with your partner, or not even a partner, let alone yourself, like just putting your left hand on your heart, your right hand on your cock or your belly, and just connecting with yourself. Because for me, I couldn't experience pleasure for the longest time. I remember I did this breath work training, and it's like, okay, experience pleasure in your body. And I'm like, what's that? I'm like, I don't know what that is, because I was so in the mind. And I was like, okay, it's time to experience pleasure. All right. And I was like trying to like mind the pleasure into existence, but it wasn't possible for me. And so really for men, it's about connecting the cock to the heart and opening up and allowing yourself to feel safe and dropping out of the mind and analyzing women and porn, and just like connecting the cock to the heart, breathing with your body, and realizing that can be just as pleasurable as watching porn. And that is a possibility. And I want to plant that seed for any men that are watching, or women, but specifically men in my work.
Thank you, Alex. Yeah, beautiful. Naomi, Nadine, what do you want to share about this? You know, tell us about your experiences, you know, what you've seen, what causes people to really disconnect from the heart space, and how can we bring people back to that space of heart connection?
Yeah. Well, look, my own experience has led me to the modalities that I work in. And speaking for myself, there was, you know, a history of sexual trauma, and as a child, and then that perpetuated into even partnerships, you know, and whether or not that was like quite often not deliberate, and quite often through porn. You know, I was receiving the messages of, you need to behave these ways, you know, this is this expectation of you, and it's even, you know, for me it's even deeper as a human, and as a female human. There were always these messages around what makes you worthy in the world. And so, like, I know myself, I you know, became for a while the performance and also the addict, you know, like it's very kind of complex. But in the processes of actually healing that, and also with what I see in the people that I work with, it's a journey really of being able to heal the parts of us that we've actually damaged or have been damaged, you know. And that has taken such a long road of compassionate awareness, and really calling all of those parts back in and holding them, you know, gently, and seeing that. And sometimes they still arrive, you know, like Rumi says, when the friends arrive at the door, sometimes they still arrive, and it's a matter of just like, what do I need here now? And that's, I'm always kind of encouraging people to kind of come into that connection. And then also, you know, we do all of these things cognitively and emotionally and intentionally, in our conscious kind of way forward. But the embodiment stuff is such a big piece that's kind of come for me more intentionally later on. So, you know, in yoga, in dance, in movement, and in sex, you know, the way we use our body, like to actually realize that we are having that conversation with the energetics that's stored in the membranes, like, and slowly but surely letting that shift with loving attention. Yeah, that's a big question.
It's
Yeah.
key. Thank you for sharing that, Naomi. It's really key to have awareness of what comes up for you. You know, even within intimacy, when you still have undealt trauma, intimacy is that first thing that will awaken that for you big time, right? But if you have a partner or a husband or a wife or whatever that really is truly connected to you and that can help you move through that, it is incredibly healing. It's a very healing process to be in. But
Mm.
you know, what is stored in our soul memory, you know, even if you're not in a space of intimacy, before you get into that space and before you grab that sexy novel or that book, you know, that feeds your or gets your juices flowing, if we want to say it in that way, you know, or before you watch that porn, sit with the feeling. What is this that's coming up for me? You know, how can I truly connect with myself? It's about slowing down as well. You know, intimacy is a beautiful gift that we can give ourselves. And I think a lot of people don't get that. You know, it's been skewed by what we have seen in the world and what the horrible things that happen out there, you know, and I'm an advocate for really helping our children understand that it's okay and that we need to celebrate sexuality from a very, very young age and not make it dirty, but make it something that is beautiful, that is connected. So yeah, I love that that what you shared, Naomi. Thank you. And it is a big question. You know, we can go whichever way with this. But Nadine, I want to hand over to you. What's your thoughts on this?
Oh, yeah, it's interesting. I'm called to kind of share a little bit of my personal story on healing, which
Go
which
for
brought
it.
me to this place.
Sure.
Um, in thinking about that universal love, knowing that I was tuned into that. Yeah, kind of I think the seed that was planted for me to pursue sacred sexuality in my career and my life was, I had a beautiful first boyfriend. I had beautiful sacred sexuality actually with my first boyfriend. Despite being in this like really hardcore religious Catholic family, I had a beautiful first experience. However, there was an interesting dynamic happening. Like our Catholic priest was a molester. He was one of the ones that was accused, and like intuitively I knew it. So there was very strange messages. So when I broke up with my first boyfriend, the second person I had sex with, it was kind of more of that young energy where, he was very sexy and hot and popular and watched porn. And the sexual experience was very disconnected. It was, typical, I guess. But I got herpes and HPV. So I was 18 years old, second person I had sex with, and it was awful, and I think that was all of the shame of it not being in a container and yada yada yada. Then suddenly I was this young woman in a position where I always had to disclose that, so I was constantly living this like connection to
Mm.
shame and dirtiness and all the messages from my family and religion. So when I fell in love and got into some more spiritual practices, I began having these awakenings in my womb. Because the depth of my partnership and our love, I would have these like lightning bolts. It felt like lightning in my womb. And I was praying and meditating, and I got pregnant. We had to watch the pregnancy because of that, but nothing happened. And shortly after that, um, I got tested, both blood work and everything, and they were clear. And so for almost, I don't know, how old am I now? Like for 35 years or so, it's completely cleared and gone
Mm, wow.
from this beautiful sacredness and soul in-depth surrender and love and sexuality that I began to experience with my partner. Like I healed that.
That
And
is profound. Holy potatoes, my goodness. Nadine, that's
yeah.
incredible. Yeah, and that's that kundalini, that spark, you know,
Mhm.
that beautiful unconditional love. And I feel it like a gold energy always, you know. Thank you so much for sharing your experience and being vulnerable, really vulnerable in your sharing, because I think a lot of people can resonate with that. And um, you know, there is a lot of healing to be had within that space of sexuality if you surrender into what is possible for you. You know, often there's so many people that do not even experience orgasm, that do not even experience that space. But you don't have to have an orgasm. It's the journey that you're on. You know, people are always looking at like, oh, what's the outcome? I want to get to the outcome. Then you know the lights will fly, and you know I'll explode into stars and all sorts of things. And it's not about that. There's this
Exactly.
chemistry, all chemistry of source that happens within your body, tingles, and your cells get awakened. And I remember, and I'll share another personal experience. I was doing some breath work. I had my hands on my hips, and I could feel my hands going really, really hot, incredibly hot. And there was so much pain that was going through my lower body. And all of a sudden, it just was like a breakthrough. And I had the biggest Kundalini experience of my life. It was like I was birthing worlds through my yoni. And it was like this explosion of incredible energy within my body. It was like I was starlight. And it was through that birthing of, you know, the star or whatever that was called. I don't know exactly. I don't understand exactly what happened that day. All I know is that it was the catalyst for me stepping into the work. I opened my channels in a big way, and things started flowing through me. I became this divine channel for source energy. So there is so much more to be had through, okay, you know, you hear people speaking about, oh, I've had a Kundalini awakening, and you want one as well because it sounds so amazing. But it's not about that. It's about how much work you've put into yourself, your inner self, connected with yourself, allowed yourself to come into that space of inner union, which is where I came to that day of inner union. I experienced the universe within myself. Alex, Naomi.
Yeah. Beautiful. I'd love to share. And you know, I just want to, any men listening or women, I just want to, I want to denormalize when people make love and the man looks away. Like I just had a client the other day, and he said he hasn't made love with eye contact in, like, I think he said like 10 years. Like he hasn't made eye contact with his partners. And I was like, fuck. I'm like, is this really happening? And I know a lot of men, I would say 99.9% of men have experience. They're making love and they're looking away, and they're imagining something else in their head. It's a complete disconnect with the body. And so speaking on Kundalini, yeah, I had an experience this year, and it was really beautiful. And I want to share this and realize, like, it's possible, like, for anyone. Like, I was just a normal kid raised in like a normal family. Like, you know, I was raised in Winnipeg. It's like the third coldest city in the world. Like I was raised like super average, like, but it was to me a curiosity to explore the unknown, and a willingness to be open and to trust in whatever you believe in, the universe, God, infinite intelligence, whatever you believe in. Just trust that it's okay to open up, and trust that there is deep pleasure outside of the outcome. There is deep pleasure in opening up in the present moment. And recently, I had a lover, and she was celibate for 3 years, and we met, and we had a really synchronistic meeting. It was really, really interesting, and neither of us, like, it's just like we kind of came together, and I'm like, okay, I think there's something to explore here. And so we moved forward with it, and she's never experienced like a mature masculine. Like, that's why she went celibate. She had a really bad experience in the past, so she's like, just shuts off, you know, I'm celibate, because she was traumatized in the past from some man. And so I felt safe enough to explore this with her and to hold space for her. And so we set everything up. We set the container. It was so beautiful. And we started with like 10 minutes of meditation and hand holding, and then we connected our hearts, breathing together, tuning into anything that's coming up, anything that's present in the moment, speaking our desires, speaking any mind stuff that starts to surface. And once everything, all the mind and the stuff was kind of dealt with, we moved into intimacy. And it was extremely healing, not only for her, but also for me to realize that like this kundalini or this energy has the ability to heal, because dis-ease in the body can't survive. It can't be there in the frequency of healing or in the frequency of love or bliss. That dis-ease cannot be there. And so really in this connection that we had, it was so beautiful. She sent me a message like recently, and she's like, I didn't know this was possible. Thank you so much. My whole world has opened up. And so for me, it's realizing like this is not only, of course, it's a sacred union, but that frequency, number one, it's going to heal you. It's going to heal the person that you're with. But number two, it's going to heal like your energy, you carrying that frequency into the world. People are going to feel that, because all energy carries information. And if you have this beautiful information when you're walking in the world, people are going to start to look at you and ask you questions. And that's just more opportunities to just ripple out and ultimately enhance the collective. And so that experience was so beautiful. And it's been happening more and more and more in my life, when men can disconnect from the outcome and disconnect from objectifying women and just using them as an object to pleasure themselves.
Wow, very powerful for the men that's listening, or even for the women. Please let your men watch this video, because there's so much power and so many golden nuggets within what we are speaking of and about. And I feel like for every man, and what I loved what you said, Alex, was you take a moment to tell each other what was alive for you, to connect through the heart space, to really look at each other. And one thing that I want to speak into as well is that sacred sexuality is actually looking with the eyes as well. Really, it's beyond desire. It's an honoring. It's respect. It's trust. It's truth. It's divinity. And when you look at someone and you really look at them on a physical level, but also through into their eyes, into their soul, there's this deep connection that happens that then sets up the whole process of your intimacy, of your connection. Where if you just go and, women as well, they like, and often women fake their orgasms because like, oh, I just want to get it over and done with, because it's just another task. Oh, I've ticked it off my box, or my list today, done. In thinking about the washing that they've got to do. And this real disconnection that we have from, because we are one with each other, but this real disconnection we have from source when that happens. And it's the separation that's been created within our world. And they know, the elite, the powers that whatever, that's trying to keep humanity in this matrix of control. They know that when we come back to this divine space of love, through intimacy, through connection with all, that they've got a problem. Because that's when humanity, come back into oneness. That's when we obliterate separation within ourselves, when we can heal our trauma, when we can heal the pain of the past, our ancestors, all of that, right? And we can release the shame and the blame and the judgment of self around this, within this space. Yeah. And often, like Nadine said, there's real physical wounds, which is like the getting sick after you've had sex, and then having to go through that process of healing physically as well, and having the almost like to the outside world, the judgment that comes in with it as well. Yeah, that's a lot to deal with. So yeah, I want to speak into this because it's important, I feel, especially into, let's talk about the trauma. Or Naomi, do you want to share one of your experiences?
It might even feed into what you're
Okay,
speaking.
great.
I don't know. Keep
Yeah,
going.
so
Yeah.
I want to talk about trauma because when I was younger, I did go through sexual assault, and it was not something that I was physically aware of, but something that kept on coming back to me and coming back to me all the time. And I would see visions of it in my mind, and my ego was trying to say to me, it never happened. But the visioning was so clear that how could it not have happened? And it went beyond something that I could speak to my family about. It went beyond something that I could speak to anybody about, and I had to come within and deal with it within myself. And I remember I had to go through a death and rebirthing experience to let go of all of that trauma, you know. And when we are going through that experience, we're literally saying goodbye to the old self, to all that we thought that we were, perceived ourselves to be, and what that pain is that we've held on to for such a long time. So how do we, you know, when we get to that space of where trauma is ruling our lives, but we have this awareness that something has happened, or we know that something's happened, how do we move beyond into a space of alignment, congruency, deeper connection with ourselves, and come back into wholeness instead of feeling separate from this world? Naomi?
Yeah, happy to share. And I guess that is something I can really speak to personally. Having also had multiple experiences of feeling perpetrated against in some way or another. When that happens, you know, the nervous system takes kind of an imprint and it, like I said earlier, you know, it's kind of locked in into the body. And the undoing of that, I mean, it's one thing to kind of get the right kind of healing, the right kind of therapy, you know, really like advocate like getting the supports. And there are some beautiful, beautiful supports out there. And if I hadn't had those, you know, it would have taken, I don't know, thank God I had those. But I think too, you know, there's been this essential sense of wonder and innocence that needed to return to me. And that's even kind of, I guess, like our whole world needs to be able to return to that essential innocence in every layer. Like it's not just in the bedroom or in sensuality, it's all of the things, right? And I guess too, like in doing a lot of nervous system regulation, so yoga, so meditation techniques, just like many things, that has helped, but also just this conscious intentionality around coming into contact with each moment of my lived experience and carrying a sense of like that sense of wonder into, you know, the way the water feels on my skin in the shower and the way that the breeze touches my face as I'm walking, or the hair, like these constant, almost like when you are walking, you know, through water, you're really aware of like a lot of what's going on you viscerally. Yeah. So it's almost like my life is becoming more and more moments of walking through the world, having almost like I call it making love to life, making love to source itself. It's like my lovemaking doesn't begin and end when I'm with a partner. It doesn't, you know, it's this really attuned thing that's starting to just kind of be this slow burn all the time within me. And then there are moments where it gets full expression, whether that's by myself or with a lover. But it's just this powerful way of pretty much the opposite of trauma, you know, pretty much the opposite of like what's happening when I'm kind of a victim in that space of feeling my pain and my trauma. It's like moving back through to the original intention of being. I feel like that's quite quite a large statement, but that's, you know, that's possible. Yeah.
That's exactly how I feel. Becoming one with the world, with source, with everything around you. You know, taking note of the minute details, and I think this is, you've spoken so beautifully into our topic, which is how do I harness the power of sacred sexuality? Is connecting to all that is available to you in all aspects of your life. noticing the beauty of nature, noticing the beauty of the simplicity of life, the love of animals, the unconditional love of animals. There's so much, when you bite into a fruit, receiving joy from that and pleasure from that is so much more significant and profound than just living or moving through the world like a ghost, and a lot of people are like that. Yeah, Alex, do you have anything to add, or Nadine?
Yes, I do. I one thing that's alive right now is the last step before a boy transitions into the mature masculine is the hero, but before that is the divine child. And people often tell me, they're like, the coaches and mentors and friends, I'm like, okay, what do you think my super skill is? Like, what do you see in me? And they say that you have this like divine child innocence that you've never lost since you were a young boy. And so bringing that back, the question that I'll ask everyone is, what were you like before, as a child? What were you like before you were maybe conditioned, or before the trauma? What was that essence of pleasure? Or you might have had a candy, or you might have had toys as a kid. Like, what was that like childlike excitement? And just like Naomi said, like how can you constantly make love with the universe from operating from that perspective, for that childlike excitement? And you could bring that into sensuality and sexuality, but really, how can you bring that divinity in, that divine child, that curious, playful child into your life? And for the men out there, the second thing that came through was, when most men, the issue with men and sexuality right now, in my opinion and my experience, is that most men don't have a masculine role model to help initiate them into manhood. For myself, I had an absent father. He was very feminine. He's a beautiful man. I love him so much. It's just like, this was the journey that I had to go on. And so I had to seek a mentor from somewhere else. And I got that mentor in the form of Tony Robbins, this big 6'8" guy. And so I went to all of his events, and he was, that masculine, that healthy, mature masculine mentor for me. And so for men, my invitation to you is, are you still operating from boy psychology? And have you, even if you're 30 or 40, have you been really like initiated from a group of brothers, or from a man, or from an elder, or someone that you respect, into this mature masculine? Because once you go into that mature masculine, then intimacy, then connection, just it happens naturally, and you're going to show up in a different way. And last thing, thirdly, and then I'll pass it on, is the shame and guilt part. I think it's really, really huge, because I remember when I was 14 or 15, my dad found a box of condoms in my closet, and he freaked out on me. I'm ready to use protection, and my dad's freaking out on me. And so my first experience with my father of sexuality was shame, guilt. Why the fuck do you have condoms in your closet? And I think he like spanked me. I'm like, what? Like, dude, like, I'm like I thought that's what they taught me in school. And so then I hid. Then I went into my shadows, and then I went to porn, because I'm like, okay, well, I guess I'm not going to use the condoms then, because my dad doesn't like that. They're good. And so then I went to watching porn, and then the porn escalated, and then the more guilt and shame, the more shadows that played out. And I think with a lot of men, and especially a lot of women that are sexually assaulted, it's from men that have that suppressed life force energy, and the men don't know how to express it, because it can't be destroyed and it can't be created. It's only transmuted. And so we need to put it into something. And if men have to suppress sexuality from a young age, then they're going to look at women, and they're going to like want to control and dominate, and they're going to express this dark masculine in a very unhealthy way. And so it's okay, how do I express my natural sexuality that's there, and it's not going away, it's not being created, it's going to always be there? How can I transmute that and redirect that into something more healthy? And that's like really the core that I wanted to get across today.
Yeah, I love that. How can we turn the shadow into gold, hey, and redirect it so that it brings us more pleasure and joy, and that we can live from that space? Yeah, so powerful. Thank you, Alex. And I love the boy psychology that you talk about, and I'm not fully understanding it. So maybe you want to just try and explain a little bit more about that so people
Sure.
can understand.
Yes, thank you for yeah. So boy psychology is, there's different archetypes. So for men, if you haven't read the book, the 4 masculine archetypes, which are, I'm not going to get into them all now, but I'll plant the seed. It's the king, warrior, lover, magician. And so those are the 4 main masculine energy archetypes. And before that, there's also archetypes within the boy psychology, which is like the kid in the high chair, the high chair kid that wants everything. Give me this, give me that, and they get it, and then it's not good enough, and they complain. Or it's the weakling prince, the kid that's like, oh, life's so hard, and I'm a victim, and all of this. And so there's different archetypes within that boy psychology, and the boy psychology is very much the world owes me. It's very much I'm a victim. It's not an empowered state, but naturally you'll start to escalate further and further back into your divine child, your inner child expression. And then eventually you'll realize your power and be like, holy shit, I'm a man, I could do this. You face the world. So often men and women, but men go traveling and they go backpacking and they want to do all this stuff. They start a business and they feel like anything's possible. And then they move into the hero, like I want to save the world, And then so from that lower victim, the world owes me, give me everything, psychology, entitlement, you can transition into the hero, and then the hero is the last step, usually before the boy gets initiated into the mature masculine, which is normally done from either a father or an elder or a mentor or some form of group of brothers. Does that answer your question a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. And also the same goes for women. So, instead of the king, it's the queen. So we have the same archetypes for women, and it's exactly the same explanation. So thank you so much, Alex, for clarifying that. And if you're listening and if you find yourself stuck in one of those archetypes and you want to shift that, what kind of tools can we give these beautiful people that are listening? What can we tell them? How can we shift from that space into, the more divine feminine, and I love the fact that, say the mature masculine, because it is also the mature feminine rising into our grace, into our beauty, and to our goddess is like, letting go of all the childish stuff, but still holding on to the innocence and the fun and the joy and the passion of being a woman. So what kind of tools can you, share with these beautiful people today?
For sure. Yeah, very, very practical. So what I wish I would have known, and being raised, with an absent father was a beautiful experience, and I love it very much. But specific tools for men and for women, it's find someone that if you feel like there's still development, which I mean we're always growing. So number one, appreciating where we're at, be like I fucking rock. And at the same time, it's like okay, there's always improvements. But it's finding a man or a woman that you see them and you're like, wow, like I really I respect, I see the qualities in you, like and you're seeing something in them that you maybe haven't activated within yourself. And so when you find a mentor or a role model, feminine or masculine, just really like invite them to teach you. Be like, hey, like I have that childlike curiosity, have that investigator willingness to learn. And for me, it was with Tony Robbins, for example. But for you, it could be with your grandmother. You might really admire her ability to love unconditionally and care for you and nurture you. And start to ask questions. Start to be curious. And so really finding that mentor in that space that you can look up to, and maybe has qualities that you haven't yet activated within yourself. That would be the really main one that I would suggest.
Beautiful. Yeah, I love that. Because often we don't know where to start, right? So if there's someone that we really resonate with and that speaks to our soul, and I always believe it's a soul calling. And if there is mentors that want to work with you, they'll never push you into anything, right? They'll always invite, always hold sacred space for you. Yeah. Nadine, is there anything you want to add? Any tools you want to share or anything you want to add about what we spoke about?
It's beautiful. I love everything you're sharing, Alex, so much. My mystery school, we work with the divine feminine archetypes. We have 13 archetypes we work with, and yeah, there's a journey. And so I do think calling upon those different parts of ourselves, and so finding a tool, whatever it is, whether it's like archetypal work or one of the personality tests, like finding tools to help us understand the different parts so that if we're caught up in one of our trauma responses or the victim of sexuality, or we're trying to heal physically through sexuality, like activate the part that knows how to look for help. And so I do think having guides is really good, especially coming from Western cultures. There's so much shame around intimacy and sexuality and embodiment in general. Most spirituality from the West is very disembodied. And so I find, maybe finding a teacher or a mentor in Tantra or Neo Tantra, or someone you really, really, really trust, whether it's a couple or individual. I think that's important. And, I always say to the couples I work with, like, no one has taught us these things. How many of us have had healthy examples of sacred sexuality or relationships in long-term relationships or even in casual? So I think the more that we know, there's resources, there's books, there's people. And I think for deep trauma, like I'm a big proponent for sexual healers, for dakinis and dakas, and it's also really tricky work. So to make sure that you really get references and know who you're working for. But I think some of the sexual healing work that's out there is absolutely profound.
Mm.
Some of the tantra teachers are very, very profound. And yet to really make sure where our alignment is and have our support team. Yeah.
Beautiful.
And to
I
know
know
that it
that.
changes. We're going to have different guides and teachers along our way. We're going to outgrow certain ones, and we're going to constantly be evolving.
Yeah, beautiful. And that's the thing is we are on a journey. We're not on a race. Okay, or in a
Yeah.
race as such. Nadine, I know that you've done some, obviously you're a sexual healer as well. You work with couples and everybody. And so what does that sexual healing, I mean, you don't have to go into the intricacies of it, but what does a session like that look like for people that are out there? Because they like, oh my gosh, especially I know there's yoni mapping and there's all sorts of things, but people go,
Yeah.
oh, I don't want to go there. That's scary. How do you just explain
I
a little
know.
bit more so people understand what happens?
Yeah. There's so many layers to it, right? You can find people. I have a series on my website, by the way. I have a series where I talk about different levels of this. So I think the first way is to always start doing the work yourself. So whether it's, guided meditations or certain books that do yoni mapping, maybe you have a mirror and you do practices where you do womb work, through meditation or sacred touch. That's always important to start with, by yourself. I don't do hands-on work anymore with individuals. I did for a while, when I was training and for about 10 years. And so what that looks like is you have a partner, a healer who has a session with you. Sounds a little similar to some of the work, the experience that Alex had with the person that he mentioned. Um, to me, it was the most profound work I'd ever experienced, to be in a container where I knew there wasn't going to be any sex, but someone was going to sit there who was trained and reflect back to me how they were feeling in my presence or what they were noticing. And it was so uncomfortable. It just like, oh, squeamish. And just, I had to go through so many. This was after I became a psychotherapist, you know, and this work was profound because there's this unveiling of my soul, of my intimacies. I can't hide. And to have someone just sit there grounded and be like, wow, well, are you a grounded woman? You're being you're being a little trickstery right now. Like that's, so it's like sessions where someone gets really authentic and really real with you. And then you have conscious sacred touch in various layers of nudity that you're comfortable with. But the practitioner is always asking for permission. you know,
Yeah.
there's never any goal for pleasure release or anything like that. It's like sacred touch. So to me, it was the first time I was able to experience just feeling my body and my sexual energy without someone needing anything from me. So that allowed all that energy to come in and like touch the cells and the layers where I had armoring. So
Mm.
that's what really good professionals can look like. They're going to hold space for you so that you can actually be vulnerable in this intimate state, but it's
Yeah.
not reciprocal. You don't have, you don't give anything. You're just being really honored as a divine being. um, so that's, I think that's good. And it's tricky because it can be messy work too, of course. So that's why I say be really conscious. And when I work with couples, sometimes I do, sometimes I'll do a session with couples and I'll sit and I'll just reflect back what I see. Not like when they have really intimate sex or anything, but just with like hand on heart touching. I reflect back what I see and I give assignments and then we talk about it.
Hmm,
So that's
beautiful.
yeah, that's how that
Yeah.
that's how
And I also want to state, thank you for sharing that, Nadine, that it's not about the sex, okay? It's not
oh
about the
yeah
outcome here. It's about
yeah
coming back to yourself, honoring each person where you at in your journey. It's incredibly profoundly healing, and also honoring the person that you are connecting with, coming back to connection with each other. Um, and sacred touch is so beautiful. Sacred touch for yourself. It is something that helped me heal the,
hmm
the traumas that I've been through. Um, Personal sacred touch. And when I was doing Centaura practitioner training, I actually downloaded information from Source about how to expand sacred touch even further, where we actually sending energy from our fingertips through our fingertips into our cells and start, feeling um, the inner world, our inner world in a completely different way, and how healing that is, and how just by placing your hand or your fingers on a specific spot, it can trigger trauma, it can help to heal, bring up anything. And it's the same with yoni mapping, but this is full, you can call it full body mapping as such, and you doing it for yourself. And it's about taking time, run a bath and take time to run your hand up your arm. Just start with your arm or your hand. Some people are so traumatized that they numb, they have numbness all over their body. And so it's about coming back to the self and really starting to connect with what feels good for you. What is the feeling that you're experiencing? If it doesn't feel good, breathe through that space, through that feeling, and allow yourself to come out the other side. And if you have, if you start crying, if you're screaming, I mean, there were moments where I went through that, like I said, that death rebirth cycle where I was literally screaming as I was releasing trauma. And it sounds weird, but it's not weird. It's we've kept this crap down us for such a long time. We are
hmm
human beings. We are meant to feel. We are meant to live through our human experience, or, have source move through our human experience here as well. So let's stop shutting down from that
yeah
space where we can connect, be all in that space where we connect with each other. And when we do it in this way, we connect in a different way with the planet, with animals, with plants. Our ears, our eyes start opening up. Yeah, we rise into this higher consciousness
yeah
as this divine being. Yeah. So, anyone else want to add anything to that before we finish our talk today? Thank you so much for being here. But just anything else that you want to add, a last golden nugget you wish to share?
can I add one golden nugget real quickly?
Sure, go for
Although
it.
no, and speaking of the yoni mapping and some of the work I trained in and did and that I teach couples, I realized we didn't speak to this specifically in this forum. Some of the most profound witnessing I had was on lingam healing. So we talk a lot about yoni right now and everything, but in talking about pornography and some of the desensitization that the masculine has had, even with circumcision, that's been pretty widespread. It's changing now, but it's absolutely profound that men have this healing too. That men really, really receive conscious sacred touch on the lingam, and in particularly like just that really conscious heart to lingam being the penis. That's deeply needed. And that isn't something that I think is spoken about enough. How powerful that can be for the masculine to have that deep honoring of the phallus, of the lingam. And what I found when I teach partners and the women how to honor the masculine in that way, the man can then have the space to not be in performance mind and allow all of his tears and all of his shame and missing of the feminine to come into a more receptive place. So I just wanted to talk about that. I realize that's such an important part of this work too, is to really learn how to honor the lingam as well. There's a lot of focus on like yoni, healing right now, but it's a both thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, do you want to speak into that, Alex?
Yeah, of course. I'll keep it brief. Pardon the dog barking at my voice, but yeah. So I was circumcised at a young age, and I'm not going to let that, of course, take the power over me. But I asked my father, Hey, Dad, why am I circumcised? He's like, oh, I don't know. It's my family did it. It's cleaner and da 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 da. And I'm like, okay, I guess it's normal. And I mean, of course, at a young age, like if you're circumcised most of the time, like that's like an assault, like a sexual assault on you at a young age. Like that's not consensual. Someone's touching your sacred space and they're cutting something off of you. Like that's like that. It'd be silly to say that doesn't your body doesn't remember that. And so um, the second part I really want to touch on is that most men, at least in my experience, carried shame around a soft lingam, soft cock, or a semi-hard cock, especially in sex. It's like, oh no, my cock's losing its hardness, and there's shame and there's guilt, and then it just like it's very contracting. And so if a woman can come in and really honor that and say, all of you is welcome. Your soft cock is seen, it's loved, it's admired, and your semi, it's like it's so important for the man and for healing because there's a lot of shame within men around that. And so I love how you spoke on that. And so if there's any woman listening, take some time really just to place, you can lingam cup. So you just put your hands on the lingam and just really, you don't have to do anything just too woo-woo. You can just literally just place your hands, place your energy and breathe together and just really be present with the man's lingam. And it's very, very healing. And for men, be receptive to the feminine energy touch because most of the profound healings in my life, my Kundalini awakening, some really massive releases, energetic releases, it was from the touch of a feminine. And it was from me allowing myself to be safe, taking off the warrior armor and tuning into the receptive side and being, okay, I'm safe, I'm held. This feminine, she's here for me, she's present, and knowing that she's got you. And a lot of healing and a lot of beauty can come from that. So I'm glad that you touched that, Nadine. Thank you.
Beautiful.
Yes.
Thank you, Alex. Naomi, anything you want to share?
Oh man, I've just been in tears myself because it's just such a powerful thing to be in a space where we get to share this, where we get to talk about these such powerfully important things. And I've been really resonating with what you've all been sharing because I've experienced all of these pieces too, and it's just so important. What was kind of bubbling in me as I was listening was this sense of I think we separated, we polarized, we took the soul out of sex. We did this decompartmentalizing thing where we were like, okay, well, that belongs over here and this belongs over, and it's just this sense of this unifying healing space where the whole self and this, the whole of the spiritual realm is in connection. And for me now, I think self-pleasure is prayer, and it's playful, and sacredness is all of the things, but it's about the intentionality. And it just, everything I'm hearing through what Alex and Nadine and you're sharing is this sense of just choosing to have this intentional path, and then the next right thing. Like I think it can be quite overwhelming sometimes for people, particularly if you have got trauma history. And so to not place huge expectations on where you're going next, and not look at things like, oh, even just listening to what we're speaking of, some of this, for some people, we're sharing stuff that would just be mind-blowing, And so it's like, okay, just coming back to the heart, just being in this moment of loving what is here now. And then from there, that being the most important thing, then from there, the next right thing in the next breath. I mean, that's really just what was arising for me, so that we can access, because I think we can overwhelm ourselves. We can kind of flood ourselves with these expectations. Yeah, like it's, it can be so big. But I'm just so grateful to be part of this conversation in the world.
Thank you so much. And I just want to add into that as well before we go. If you are a seeker of something, we all seekers, right? But you're not going to find it at festivals where you're chasing that high constantly, at spiritual workshops where you're constantly chasing that high, please, you will only find what is for you within you. Come back to yourself, come back to your heart, like Naomi said. There is nothing worse than going to a space where it's not supporting you. I've dealt with many people that have gone through trauma in a space, in a sexual space, where they've come to me and they said, like, what do I do? Because I don't want anyone to touch me ever again. And not just in a sexual way, but like really not wanting to be in community or communion with any person because of their experience. So, and that's a conversation for a whole different day. I know that, but it's also about not going and wanting to chase the high continuously to fill that void. Honor that void, that emptiness. Go within, go into that space, explore, ask questions of yourself. Start with the heart, but start with touch. Touch is so profound. It's so healing with your own self. And then if it feels safe for you, then to invite your partner, your husband, your wife into that space, then, invite that in as well. And yes, mentors can help you a lot. It's, that's why we're here. That's why we're here, to do the work. But you've got to find that person that truly is walking the walk and talking the talk. Yeah. So, my loves, I just want to say thank you so much for this incredibly deep conversation. From my heart to yours, I truly honor the work that you are doing and your own experiences, everything that you have been through. And please check out these people's work, connect with them, talk to them, just have a conversation with them. It will open up your heart and, your world to so much more. And thank you so much for being on Spirit Talks. I love you from my heart to yours. Thank you so much.
Thank you.